Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Well, hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders, the Authority Positioning Coach. And today we have with us Liston Witherill, who is with Serve, Don't Sell, Get Clients Without Depending on Referrals. That's his mantra, that's his tagline, and that's where he focuses. And I just love that Liston is that serve, don't sell, because boy, in business, you don't need to be a salesperson to focus on selling, because if you're an entrepreneur, solopreneur, or small business owner, we sell. So I feel like sometimes that sell word gets people confused to go, oh, I'm not a salesperson. Well, if you own your own business, if you're a solopreneur, if you're a coach, if you're a consultant, you're selling, or else how are you generating income? So welcome, and give us a little bit of insight on how you came to that mindset and philosophy of serve, don't sell, and then let's move into how do you get clients without depending on referrals?
Sure. So it's, the truth is a little bit of trial and error, but yeah. I'm very interested in psychology, and I have a marketing background and sort of behavioral economics. Like my lifelong journey is to try to figure out, why do people do the things they do? Like, how do they make these decisions, and why do they make those decisions? And the truth is, it's very hard to change anybody's mind. I know that may come as a shock to a lot of people, but it's a long process, and often doesn't work. And what I find is when a lot of people think about selling, what they mean is this really high pressure situation where they're sort of using tricks, mental tricks, in order to apply urgency that's often false, and get people to make a decision that they're not ready to make yet, right? And in consulting businesses and service-based businesses, our sales are really high ticket. Even in some software businesses, deals can be 6, 7, even 8 figures.
Sure.
And if you're looking at a deal of that size that can have such a huge magnitude and impact on your business, to me, it doesn't make sense to apply all these tricks of the trade and quote unquote close them, which is what most people think about when they think of selling. Yep. But really, selling is a collection of activities and behaviors that ideally lead someone into doing business with you, right? Sometimes they won't, and that's fine. That's part of the game, right? But as I thought about it, and I've tried lots of things, and I've read a lot, and I've done a lot of selling, and I've been running my business for many years now, one thing that became very clear to me is being an educator, an advocate, and a peer to your clients is the most effective and powerful way to sell. This comes as no surprise to you, obviously, Mike, because your whole thing is about authority positioning, and so you want to be seen as the go-to source of information, and that is a critical part of the sale as well. So for me, this has been, a journey to understand why are people buying, and try to meet them in a place where I can really be their guide through that process, rather than someone who gets them to do something that they don't want to do. And that's the genesis of serve, don't sell.
Yeah, I think it sounds almost cliche these days to say that, like, how do you serve, in your sales process, because, The Go-Giver, Bob Burg, awesome, love that book, but how do you actually do it? And I think that's where you then tie in what you mentioned, being that educator and advocate, and educator, not just buy scarcity, like you said, but it's like seriously going, here's my product and service, and let me listen to what you need and where your struggle is and whatever you're doing, and let's just see if there's a fit. And if there is, we'll talk about it. If there's not, I can refer you on to someone, or I can just give you some advice, but let's just talk. And I think that, in my opinion, long gone are the days of learning the 28 closes and how to get over objections and, right, close the sale. And I think that's a funny little phrase, because I love the play on words, or the antithesis of that, which is we're not really closing the sale, we're opening a relationship. And that's where I think people mistake. They go next, and they don't realize that if you have a relationship with someone, you're going to get those referrals without asking. You're going to get repeat business, cross-sell, upsell. They're going to go, hey, listen, you're doing this for me, but man, I've got this problem. What do you think about that? And you're like, oh, I've got this one package. So I think that mindset shift. Now, when you work with clients and you advise people, how do you get someone to start slowly moving past that, sell, divide and conquer and bring home, the success of closing that deal?
Well, the number one thing that people do in sales that, I won't say is right or wrong, but let's say less effective, is they talk too much. They think they're there to prove themselves, and they think they're there to, remove any shadow of a doubt from the other person, that they're an expert and they're amazing and they really know what they're doing. And what I would prefer people do, and I've seen is far more effective, and actually there's quite a bit of data that bears this out from, there's a company called Gong.io that processes sales calls, and it can figure out, the software can figure out how much each person is talking, the client versus the salesperson. And so they aggregate all that data. And what they find is the highest performing salespeople talk less.
Wow.
And the reason that's so powerful, and your original question was, how do we sort of action the serve, don't sell question? The reason that people do so much better when they're listening more is a big crucial element of selling from our perspective, the sellers, the consultants, the business owners, the solopreneurs. We need information. So one of the things that's going to compel someone to make a decision and change, because ultimately that's what we're asking our clients to do, right? We're saying, hey, your current situation, little messed up. Here's why I think it's bad. I think you should change. And one of the ways that you should change from the status quo is to pay me and help you. Yeah. That is a painful process. If you look at any major change in someone's life, those are the most stressful things we undergo. Marriage, divorce, death, go to college, leave college, change jobs, change careers. Big changes are difficult. And as consultants, we're always asking our clients to make a change, right? So what we need to do is spotlight what are they losing by not making that change, and then help them understand what would be the value of actually making the change and what's on the other end of that. What I say is, what is your better tomorrow? Because that's what people ultimately want, is some sort of better tomorrow. The only way, though, going back to the premise here, that we could figure out what the better tomorrow is by asking questions and really understanding and empathizing with the person. And so that's the crucial element of service.
And that ties into serving, because if you compare one sales scenario of the bull in the china closet, closer guy, gal, whatever that, might look like, and compare that to, just a nice conversation, questioning process, trying to figure out where some opportunities are, painting the actual picture of, okay, it sounds like you're frustrated with this, here's what would happen if this, what would it look like, and how would it feel if you experienced, and kind of picture that, perfect day, perfect business, whatever. That really is serving, because they feel like, man, that last guy that, typically no one talks to one person, buys and moves on. They talk to a couple, three people. So that other person that they just talked to, it was pushy and kind of like rubbed them the wrong way. So I think that approach then is a way that you're serving, just in your mannerisms, correct?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, one inescapable thing, and every sort of sales quote unquote guru has an opinion, and a lot of them are directly contradictory to each other. And one of them is, relationships don't matter. You don't need your clients to like you. And if you're a service-oriented business, I would argue that that's not true, that your clients usually will need to like you. If you're the only option in the market, then, this is where these high-pressure closing techniques come from. Back in the days, the seller had all of the power. You were the only place where your buyers could get information about the market and what the options were. Now, there's nothing keeping the person from saying, you know what, I really didn't like the way you were talking to me there, or the way you're treating me. I'm going to go find the other 50 options out there, right? And so, I just think it is really critical to not only serve, but by demonstrating that you want to understand this person, it does drive likability. People who ask more questions, more open-ended questions, more follow-up questions are liked more, and that turns out to be a huge asset in the sale.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that's a missing piece. I think that what you said earlier, that most salespeople just feel like, let's push and go and get her done and move on. You don't take the time to go, well, how would you feel if someone did it to you? And they're like, oh, I hate that. Right. So I think that really helps out. So let's talk about something where another temptation comes in, which is, well, hey, let me learn a little bit about your business and tell me what you're struggling with and what you're looking to achieve. And that's discovery. Let's discover what, the deal is. And the temptation is like, interrupting and interjecting. Our package here can fix that. Where do you teach your clients to use some restraint to fully get that discovery process in place so that then you can present some viable options?
Yeah. So one is just the hard and fast rule. We're not going to pitch the client during discovery. Now, if you're doing a lot of outbound sales, or outbound marketing, I guess it goes by both names now, where you're pushing out to people cold and saying, hey, I've worked with clients like you and I think I can help you. If you're doing that, you're going to need to explain a little bit about who you are at every step of the way because they have no idea, right? But during a traditional discovery process, the goal is really to understand the client and then mutually determine, is there a fit for us to work together? You can't do that if you're talking. So that's number one. The second thing is, and maybe you can relate to this, Mike, men in particular tend to jump to solving problems immediately rather than just listening and empathizing. And a lot of men are in a sales role or an entrepreneurial role, and it's a strike against us during this process. And so it's okay for our brains to start actively solving their problem. We want to try to pull back on that as much as possible. But we also don't need to say everything we think.
Yeah.
So that's another thing, is just to separate yourself from that moment, because two things happen. One is when you try to solve the problem too quickly by pitching, you're often going to get it wrong. There's incomplete information there. You need to know more. The person isn't done talking yet. And all of a sudden you're going in and you're making assumptions about how you can fix things for them. And that really works against you if you're wrong about it, and often we are. The second thing is whenever you start talking, now the conversation's about you again.
Yeah.
And that's been the urge for a lot of people in the sale, is they think they need to make it about them and sort of prove themselves, which puts you really in a weak position during the sale, right? You're the authority positioning coach, Mike. Like, you probably don't want your clients going out and trying to prove how awesome they are, right? That's not what an authoritative person does, or that's not what an expert does. What an expert does is asks really good questions because they need to understand, can I help this person or not? And in many cases, they may say, no, this is a bad fit. And so not making the conversation about you again and taking some moments to separate and not act on all of our thoughts is the second big component of that.
When you mention, get fully through the discovery, and then probably you would say, let's clarify some of the things that you discovered during that process. So maybe ask some questions. Are you saying, or do you recommend that you would not present / pitch, but present some options in that same conversation? Or is it, okay, great, nice to get to know you, I'll work up some ideas and get back to you next week, tomorrow, whatever?
Well, I think from 30,000 feet, you need to tell the client, hey, based on what you told me here, these are some of the ways that I can help you. Here's the thing. It really depends on your sale, right? I don't think there's any single sales system that covers all cases, because people start to have questions like, how fast can I pitch, or how quickly can I move from point A to point B? And it really depends on how complicated and how expensive the thing is that you're selling, and also how many people are involved in purchasing it.
Yeah.
So those are huge factors, right? But my belief is it can't be totally one-sided. It's got to be more like 70-30. The client's talking, you're asking questions, And usually the way most of my sales go, it's 1 or 2 calls for, say, coaching clients or for sort of group mentorship clients. That's a faster sale. And so during that time, I can tell them at the end of the call, say in the last 10 minutes, sort of how I see that I might be able to help them and how it connects to their greater goals. But I'm not giving them a hard pitch, and I'm certainly not hijacking the conversation and regaling them with stories about case studies. So, the more complicated your sale, I think the more you would reserve an in-depth pitch and really make it its own meeting, where your client is agreeing to, okay, I'm ready to hear exactly how you can help me, exactly how much it's going to cost, and we're going to start to dig into the details and discuss that, at which point you take over the conversation more. So no, I'm not advocating you're shutting down and not really sharing with the client. But what I am advocating is you're not treating this as a pitch meeting, right?
Yep.
You're giving them enough information so that they can understand how you can help them, what it might cost or the range of costs, and what they would need to do to get started.
So I know that there's a big aspect of explaining or pulling out, details, which is, do you focus on the fear, here's what's going on wrong, and what if you don't do something, and this could be catastrophic, and then the transformation of, look what happens when you fix this. Isn't that nice? So how do you balance the two? Do you, are you focused 50-50, where you really want someone to feel like, yeah, they could be bad if I don't, but look how good it could be? Or do you feel like there's a good, 80-20, where 80% is on one side or the other?
Yeah, I think I've never thought about it in those exact terms. I think 50-50 is about the right balance, because so what we're looking for is PGV, pain, goals, value, right? So the pain is what's going on right now. Why do I want to make a change? Sometimes people will say, oh, I don't have a problem right now, I'm just being proactive. But that's probably not 100% true. They're sensing something will come soon, and that's why they're contacting you. Like there's always some trigger that's causing us to buy, right? Something that's getting us to take action where we didn't take action before. So I really want to develop the problem with the client in their own words, where they can tell me, what's going on and continue to ask follow-up questions until we both feel like we've gotten to the truth of the matter. That pain then gets translated into goals. And so the goals typically are the opposite of the pain. So Mike, if someone comes to you and says, I really want to develop more authority, and you say, what would that do for your business? And they say, well, people just aren't choosing me. Like, I'm one of many. I'm not seen as different. And you're like, great. Okay. And if you were seen as different, what would be different about your business, or how would that change things? Oh, well, I'd be able to charge higher prices and people would pick me and I wouldn't have to prove myself. Okay, so there's our goals, right? Yep. And now we want to translate those goals into value, right? How much would you be able to raise your prices? How many more people might be coming to you? What's your rate of losing deals? What's your lead flow already? Can we recover some of those? And now we can
maybe do you ever interject into there something like, what's your average cost per client, and then factor in an estimated lifetime value? Like, hey, if they stay with you this long, and certainly they might buy something else and maybe refer someone, this new client could be valued at X. And if you could increase your close ratio just a little bit, boy, that's a big number. Do you get that granular, or just kind of stay 30,000 foot?
No, I would get that granular if that was exactly what I was doing, right? So one of the things that we want to do in the sale at some point, typically like in a longer discovery process, is set a value anchor, right? We're saying, here's what this could be worth to you, right? And now our client can compare that to the price that we're charging. And if we're doing our jobs right and we're fair, our price is much lower than the potential value that they're seeking. So yeah, I would get into that level. Not everybody is able to get into really strict quantified metrics in dollars and cents, but the more you can, the better, because then we're all on the same page, and our client doesn't have to use their imagination as much about what the potential value is of working with us.
Yeah, that's a good point. Hey, well, let's wrap it up with what are some of the quick takeaways that you would say? Okay, after listening to this one section, because this is like one of your bullet points, serve, don't sell. What would you say is the first thing that someone listening could do this next week to start implementing that or changing their approach in their business?
So the one exercise I would suggest you do is start being more conscious of when you're in conversation and you take the conversation and turn it back to yourself,
okay.
Right? So that's the number one thing that will make a difference is if you're just conscious of when you do that, you'll notice that in the future, when you're talking to clients, you're less in this mode of trying to prove yourself and trying to be liked and more in a mode of understanding and empathizing. So that would be the number one thing. I think the second thing to think about is just how to ask great questions, understanding what do you need to know in order to make an educated guess about whether you can knock it out of the park for this client, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do they match up with someone who's been really, really successful thanks to your help and thanks to your work? And in order to get that answer, we need to, first of all, have an understanding of who our perfect client is. And second of all, understand what questions we need to ask. So those are the two things, listening and questioning.
Excellent. Well, I love it. And I think that if you can just take these pieces, one by one, and we could have talked for 4.5 more hours and done 19 more bullet points, then all of a sudden you're overwhelmed and it's like, I can't do any of it. I'm just going to keep. So that's a great takeaway, great point. What's the best way that people can reach out and get in touch with you and maybe learn more, listen to your podcast, read your book, connect with you? What's the best next step forward?
Best thing to do is visit my website, liston.io, liston.io. My contact info's there. There's a form if you want to get in touch with me. And also liston.io/podcast is where I publish my podcasts. So yeah, if you would like to get in touch or just want to chat or whatever, I'd welcome the opportunity.
Awesome. Well, Liston, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneursradio.com.